Everybody, you wouldn't guess we've got a bumper week for earnings. So let's take a look at which companies are reporting earnings this week. Let's get straight into it. So we're going to be starting off on Monday before the open. We've got ON Semiconductor. Now, this isn't one I'm personally invested in, but if you are, this company expects revenues between 1.57 billion and 1.67 billion. And their earnings per share are expected in the range of 45 to 54 cents per share. Now, if you were invested, you're definitely going to want to tune in and listen. We're expecting good top line growth there as the automotive industry and industrial industry did report a good Q2. So it'd be interesting to look at that. We've got Ferrari there. You could see Global Payments, another interesting one. Obviously, with them being the point of sale in terms of collecting payments on the PDQ side of things, it'll be interesting as an indicator of whether consumer sentiment is improving and if people are actually starting to go back out in the retail world and spend. That'd be a good indicator to see where's the market in terms of post-COVID. Moving on, we've then got a few other ones you may recognize. You've got Ceragon. You've got CNA, but more interesting, let's move across to after the close on Monday. After close on Monday, you've got Continental, Solar Edge, Williams. I'm not invested in any of these, but if you are, you want to make sure that's Monday after close. Now, more interestingly for my portfolio is coming on to Tuesday before the open. We've got Corsair, which is a big investment of mine. I'll be very interested to see how they perform. Naturally, with this being one of those stocks which benefited well during 2020 in the circumstances, it'll be interesting to see how this starts to perform now as we're getting to somewhat of a normal world. Will they continue to have those good earnings? Are people still buying their products and utilizing their products, or are they, as some people are hypothesizing, people are starting to go back out and therefore they're not gaming as much or utilizing these devices? I personally think there's a lot of growth left in Corsair. It's only just begun. Their products are gaining a lot of momentum. They made the acquisition of Elgato, who have a great range of products. So it'll be very interesting to see how they perform. You've also got BP, always a big player. Again, not one I'm invested in, but interesting to see how they perform, as they're always a good indicator of where the economy is heading. Moving on to after the close on Tuesday, you've got Skills, again, another gamer. Be interesting to see where that performs. I wouldn't be surprised if that's correlated to the other companies in the industry. We know there's Activision, we know there's Corsair, Logitech, and these similar companies. They tend to follow each other in terms of how the economy is performing and therefore how they're doing. Activision reporting at the same period after the close. Now, the other interesting one to pick up on is Lyft. Now, this is going to be an interesting one. Even if you're not invested in Lyft, Uber is reporting the day after, as you can see, after the close. So you can imagine these two will be correlated in some way. So if you're invested in Uber, definitely want to look out for that Lyft earnings to give you an indication of the market and whether Uber could potentially bring in something else. Doesn't mean that they're necessarily 100% going to be correlated, but it's an interesting one nonetheless. Now, the other interesting thing to look at with Lyft is obviously given the situation with Didi in China, where they've been banned on the app stores in China. There's been a big tech crackdown over in China. It'd be interesting to see if that has any impact on the complementary companies of Lyft and Uber. Is there any fallout there? Does that impact those stocks in any way? Now, sticking to the theme of China and their crackdown, on Tuesday morning, you've got Alibaba reporting. Now, whilst the only Chinese stock I'm currently invested in is NIO in the EV space, but if I was to invest in another tech Chinese startup, it would be the Alibaba Group. Now, I mean, if you were to look at their earnings per share, I don't see Alibaba stopping growing anytime soon. They're the Amazon of the China world. People aren't suddenly going to stop using those products, right? It's deeply integrated into the Chinese culture to use their services. So I don't see that going anywhere. But if you look at the earnings per share multiple they're trading at versus something like Amazon, it's definitely something that's on my watch list to see. Maybe I can pick some up here in the dip. Moving on, we have Uber. So we have Uber, like I mentioned, reporting after the close on Wednesday, along with Roku and Etsy. Some really big players here. So all three of those are in my portfolio to some degree. Roku and Etsy more heavily than Uber, but definitely something I'm going to be keeping an eye on here. So Roku, interestingly, Netflix's earnings earlier on, they had a growth on their top line. They missed their estimate on the earnings per share, and they gave weaker guidance on their subscriber growth. So it seems like Netflix are trying to tell the market, look, we did benefit heavily during the 2020 period, but that's not going to sustain. We can't sustain that same growth that we saw when everybody was indoors. So will that be the same for Roku? Where are they heading? Do they have other areas where they've diversified their income sources so they're not just relying on that one aspect? It'd be interesting to see where we move there. But just a broader point, you're going to get this a lot with those plays. Any of those companies which benefited in the 2020 period during the illness, you're going to see that their like for likes are going to be compared against massive figures from the previous years. So the market needs to understand that and anticipate that, as it's going to be very difficult to beat those figures there. Okay, a few other interesting ones. You've got Fastly and BNGO, Bionanogenomics, which are popular in the investment community, particularly amongst retail investors. So definitely, if you guys are invested in those, make sure you're tuned in Wednesday after close. Moving on to Thursday, we've got Moderna reporting. Again, a big player in the mRNA vaccine space. How will they continue to perform as they're dishing out those vaccines? We've then got Viacom, Wayfair, if you're invested in Wayfair, Fiverr, the freelancing website. So if you're in any of those, definitely want to check those out. More interestingly for me, I'm looking at Thursday after the close because we've got Square reporting. Now, Square is one of my big investments. I've got a decent percentage of my portfolio in Square, so I'll be very interested to see how they perform. They've got a 0.3 earnings per share estimate across an average of 37 analysts, so definitely looking forward to seeing how they perform. Their revenue estimates are at 4.99 billion, so just shy of the 5 billion mark. So I'll be looking in closely to see how they perform. Looking down the list, you've also got Beyond Meat. You've got Beyond Meat, again, another big retail trading favorite. So if you're invested in Beyond Meat, then Thursday after the close is there for you. It'd be interesting to see how they continue to benefit. Again, along those lines, in terms of as the economy is opening, are people still going to be purchasing Beyond Meat and eating those ready meals? Or are they going to go out there and start utilizing restaurants and eat out places and eating different foods? So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And then just finishing off on Friday, before the open, you've got DraftKings, you've got Ocugen there. So if you invest in any of those, you definitely want to check those out. But there you go, guys. That's the week ahead. It's always good on a Sunday to have a look at which of your companies in your portfolios or companies you're interested in are reporting over this period. Make sure you take a look at their figures, have a look at their previous quarter's earnings. You can also, let's have a look here. You can head over to a website such as this, Earnings Whispers. You can take a look at what are their earnings per share estimates, what are the revenue estimates. Have a look at how the company performed in the previous quarter and try to gauge how you feel they can perform going forward. Really important that you do that to get ahead of the week and to understand, what moves do you need to play going into the week. If you're a trader, then absolutely you want to do that. If you have a certain hunch that a certain company is going to do really well in their earnings or do really poorly, and you've seen the data or you've understood something, then at least you're prepared to play that move in a swing trade or a day trade based on your preferences. I personally tend to stay away from trading too much. I'm more of a long-term investor. So it's always good for me to keep an eye on those which are in my portfolio just to make sure that I'm not missing anything. Have another look through their investment memorandums, have a look at their financials just to see how they're performing. And then obviously keep an eye on the latest earnings just to make sure I've not missed anything or if I need to recalibrate my thoughts around that business in the ever evolving economic situation. Because let's face it, this is unprecedented times. We've heard that being said a lot, but it's important that we are proactive, not reactionary. So try to get a hold of as much data as you can and make as wise a decision as you can in terms of your stock portfolio. Because again, it's not something we've seen. There's nobody here on YouTube or any other platform can say this is the game plan or this is what you need to be doing. You just need to take the data as we come. And at this point, we just need to understand, are we moving now to the recovery plays, or are the plays that did well during the virus continuing to do well? What environment are we in? It's a bit difficult to tell at the moment, and depending on which geographical territory you're in, you may have a false sense of security of, oh, things are looking safe and opening again, or the other way around. So it's really important that you take your time to analyze that data, okay? So that's it. That's your earnings for the week going ahead. I'll give you an update through the week, and no doubt I'll be going live at some point to update you on how these earnings are going. All right, we'll see you in the next one.